The girl with the red backpack. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow across the city of Vancouver. Keanu Reeves had just wrapped another long day on set. His clothes still clung to him from the intense action, scenes he'd filmed, his body aching from hours of stunts, dialogue, and focused direction. Yet there was something about finishing a scene, something that brought a strange peace. He was used to this feeling. What he wasn't used to was what came next. As he stepped out of the studio gates and adjusted the strap of his leather bag over his shoulder, he planned to head back to the hotel, maybe grab something simple to eat, and rest. The driver was already waiting near the sidewalk, a black SUV with tinted windows idling quietly. The usual routine. Quiet, predictable, normal. But then something shifted. A small voice rose above the dull hum of traffic and chatter, quiet but piercing, like a ripple through still water. "Mr. Reeves?" He turned. She couldn't have been older than 10. A little girl stood near the edge of the curb holding a worn-out red backpack in both arms like it was a treasure chest. Her shoes were mismatched, one slightly too big, the other a little too tight by the looks of it. Her hair was messy, pulled back into a crooked ponytail. But her eyes were wide and honest, filled with something that made him pause. Security stepped forward, but Keanu raised a hand gently. "It's okay," he said softly, already stepping closer to the child. She flinched slightly at his approach but didn't back away. Instead, she clutched the red backpack tighter and took a deep breath, the kind that kids take before they do something really brave. Are you really Keanu Reeves?" she asked. He smiled, crouching down so they were eye level. "Yeah, I'm Keanu. What's your name, Millie?" she whispered. There was a silence, heavy and uncertain. She glanced down at the bag, then up at him. Something trembled in her lower lip. He could sense the conflict in her. Like she had practiced this moment in her head 1,000 times and still wasn't sure how to say what she had come to say. "I know you're busy and probably don't have time for people like me," she began, her voice cracking. "But my mom used to love your movies. She said when she watched you smile, it made her feel like the world wasn't so mean." Keanu blinked. It was such a strange thing to say. Beautiful, but haunting. "Used to?" he asked gently. Millie nodded. "She died last year, in a fire. I don't have anyone now. I live at the shelter." A knot formed in his chest. He had heard hundreds of tragic stories over the years. Fan letters, meet and greets, interviews. But this girl standing alone with her crooked ponytail and that red backpack had just shattered something in him. Her story wasn't being told in a movie or on a screen. It was real, raw, painful. "I didn't come to ask for anything," Millie said suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "I just wanted to give you this." She slowly opened the red backpack and pulled out a small envelope. It was creased, smudged, and sealed with what looked like a faded sticker of a sunflower. "What is it?" he asked. "A letter my mom wrote to you. Before she died. She wanted to give it to you herself, but never got the chance. I've been carrying it everywhere, hoping maybe one day, maybe someone would help me find you." Keanu took the envelope slowly, like it was made of glass. His fingers brushed hers, and he saw the emotion she was trying so hard to hide. She was holding herself together with tape and hope. "Thank you," he said, his voice quieter than before. "Can I read it now?" Millie nodded, stepping back slightly, arms wrapped around herself as if preparing for something she couldn't control. Keanu carefully opened the envelope and pulled out the letter. The paper was thin, the handwriting messy but clearly written in a rush of emotion. "Dear Keanu Reeves, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you, but I hope it does. Your movies were the only escape I had when life got too hard. You reminded me that being kind doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger than anyone who hurts others. If I don't get the chance to say this in person, please know that you inspired me to raise my daughter with kindness and courage. Her name is Millie. She's the strongest person I know. If by some miracle she finds you, please tell her that her mom loved her more than anything, and that she's never truly alone. She just has to look for the light. Thank you for being someone who made the world better without even knowing it. Sincerely, Keanu's eyes didn't leave the letter, but his throat tightened. He could hear Millie sniffling now, wiping at her nose with the sleeve of her too small jacket, and he realized something profound. This wasn't a fan letter. It was a farewell, a message from a mother to a daughter passed through a stranger she'd never met but trusted more than anyone else to deliver the message. He folded the letter carefully and looked at Millie. "Your mom was right," he said, quietly. "You are strong, and you're not alone." But Millie didn't seem to hear him. She was looking past him now, her face suddenly pale. A man was approaching fast, tall, angry, drunk by the look of it. His voice slurred. "You little brat. You ran off again. I told the shelter I'd watch you for one night and now you're trying to get on TV?" Keanu instinctively stood and stepped in front of Millie, shielding her without thinking. "Do you know this man?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Millie was frozen. Her lip trembled again. Then she whispered, "He was my mom's cousin. He says he'll take care of me, but he drinks and yells all the time." The man stepped forward, his face red. "Mind your business, actor boy. This kid is my responsibility now, and I don't need you making her think she's some kind of princess." "You're not taking her anywhere," Keanu said, something sharp in his voice now. "Not until I speak with someone from the shelter directly." "Who do you think you are?" the man spat. Keanu didn't answer. He simply pulled out his phone, dialing with steady fingers, as the driver stepped out of the SUV behind him, already aware that something was very wrong. "You're making a mistake," the man hissed. Keanu looked him dead in the eye and said, "No, the mistake would be walking away from her." As he made the call, Millie silently moved closer to him, her little fingers finding the edge of his coat. It was then, in that one quiet moment of connection, that something changed. Not just for Keanu Reeves, not just for Millie, but for everyone who would soon hear what happened next, because the truth was, this wasn't just a random meeting. This was the beginning of something that would turn Hollywood, media, and even politics upside down, and no one saw it coming. What happens when the shelter's director reveals something about Millie's past that not even Keanu could have imagined? A secret hidden in her name. The cold wind brushed against the walls of the shelter as the sun disappeared behind a bank of gray clouds, casting long shadows across the city. Inside a quiet meeting room, Keanu Reeves sat in a chair far too small for his frame, yet he didn't seem to mind. His eyes were fixed on the small girl across from him, her tiny fingers still clutching the now empty red backpack like it held everything precious she had left in the world. Millie had stopped crying, but her body was tense, her legs swinging slowly beneath the chair. She hadn't spoken a word since they arrived, not even when the angry man, who had stormed off after being confronted, was escorted out of the shelter by staff. There was a silence between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was a silence soaked in gravity, in meaning, in the weight of something unknown but deeply felt. A door creaked open. A tall woman in her early 60s stepped in, dressed in simple clothes, but with the kind of presence that instantly commanded attention. Her name was Clara, the director of the shelter. She had kind eyes, but behind them was a storm of questions, concern, and exhaustion. She sat down slowly across from Keanu, taking a moment to look at Millie, then back at him. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her voice calm, but with an edge of disbelief. "I must admit, when my staff told me you were here, I thought it was some kind of misunderstanding." Keanu gave a tired but sincere smile. "It was unexpected for me, too." Clara's gaze softened as she turned to Millie. "I see. So this is the girl you told me about. I've only seen her a few times. She tends to stay out of sight." Keanu nodded and gently placed the folded letter from Emma on the table. "Her mother left this for me. Millie's been carrying it for months. Her mom passed away in a fire last year." Clara picked up the letter carefully and scanned the words. Her face tightened. "Emma," she whispered. "Emma. Dear God." "You knew her?" Keanu asked, his voice low. Clara slowly put the letter down, then leaned back in her chair, her hands clasped. "Emma was one of the strongest women I ever met. She came to us 5 years ago with Millie in her arms. The girl was barely walking. Her husband had disappeared, left them with nothing but debt and bruises. She was terrified, but she never let it show in front of Millie. She worked 3 jobs, took every odd shift she could get. She never asked for favors. Always said, "I just need a little time to get us back on our feet." Keanu listened closely, each word adding another layer to the girl sitting silently beside him. One day, Clara continued, she came in looking different, almost lighter. Said she had found a job as a housekeeper for a private estate out in the suburbs. Said it paid well and even gave her a room. She cried that day, but they were happy tears. She thanked us and said she'd visit. We never saw her again. Keanu frowned. And then the fire? Clara nodded. We heard about it in the papers, woman and child caught in an old estate fire, but it only mentioned the woman. No name was printed. I assumed they both had died. But Millie survived, Keanu said. Yes, I don't know how she ended up back in the system, or how she got assigned to her mother's cousin. There are gaps in the records, suspicious gaps, and our system is overwhelmed. Sometimes children just fall through. Millie finally looked. They said I was lucky to be alive. Clara turned to her voice softening. You are, sweetheart. But then something shifted in Clara's expression. She hesitated as if weighing her next words carefully. There's something else, she said, almost reluctantly. I didn't want to bring this up, not without being absolutely certain, but the name Millie gave, it triggered a memory. Keanu leaned forward, his brows furrowed. What do you mean? Clara stood up, walked over to a filing cabinet in the corner of the room, and unlocked a drawer that looked untouched. For years, she sifted through a few old folders until she pulled one out, coated in dust and age. She laid it on the table and opened it gently. Inside were photos, documents, and scribbled notes. Emma never shared much about her past, Clara said, but she once told me that she wasn't born as Emma. She changed her name when she ran away from something, or someone. She wouldn't say more, but she was scared, that much I remember. I only kept this file because it had no official record, just her handwriting. She turned a document toward Keanu. Written in faded pen were the words, "If anything ever happens to me and someone kind finds my daughter, please tell them to protect her." Her name is Amelia Grace Wexley. Keanu's breath caught. Wexley? Clara nodded slowly. I looked it up. The Wexley family owns half of Westbrook. Old money, political connections, property stretching across 3 states. Powerful, untouchable. But their family history is dark. There were rumors, abuse, isolation. One of their daughters vanished 20 years ago. No one ever found her. No charges were filed. And after a while, the story disappeared. Keanu looked at Millie, her small fingers still gripping the table. That's her? He asked. Clara nodded again. I believe so. And if I'm right, then this little girl is the only living heir to a family with millions in assets and a reputation to protect. And someone, somewhere, may have wanted her mother gone. A heavy silence followed. Keanu's thoughts were spinning. A simple encounter outside a film set had just unraveled into something far more complex. A woman hiding under a false name. A daughter raised in secret. A fire with no answers. And now, a child caught in the middle of a legacy that could be dangerous if the wrong people knew the truth. Does she know? He asked Clara, but before she could answer, Millie spoke up. I always knew my mom was hiding, she said softly. She used to tell me stories about a place with marble floors and tall stairs, about a garden that stretched forever. She said, we had to stay quiet so the monsters wouldn't find us. Keanu looked at her, feeling a mix of awe and pain. This child had carried truths too heavy for most adults. Clara sighed deeply. We need to be very careful now. If the Wexley family learns about this, and they're the kind of people I suspect they are, they might try to claim her, not out of love, Out of fear of what she represents. Keanu stood slowly, his mind racing. Then we keep her safe, he said firmly. Whatever it takes? Clara looked at him with a wary expression. Do you understand what you're stepping into, Mr. Reeves? This isn't a script. These people, they won't hesitate to cover their tracks. He nodded. Neither will. At that moment, Clara's office phone rang. She picked it up and listened, her expression hardening. What is it? Keanu asked. Clara's voice dropped. Someone just called the front desk asking for Millie by her full name. But no one here has access to that file. It's not digital, not even staff knew it existed. Keanu's blood turned cold. How long ago? 3 minutes. Keanu turned to Millie, his voice calm but urgent. We need to leave, now. Outside, night had fully arrived, and with it, shadows began to move. Somewhere in the distance, someone had just realized the girl with the red backpack was alive, and they were coming. A silent black car starts following Keanu and Millie. Someone is watching them, and the past is about to erupt in the most unexpected place. Shadows behind the glass. The street outside the shelter was colder than before. Not because of the temperature, but because of something else, something unseen. Keanu Reeves felt it in his chest like a pressure building behind his ribs. And it wasn't the weight of fame or exhaustion anymore. It was instinct. The same instinct that kept him alive in motorcycle wrecks and dangerous movie stunts was now telling him something real and dangerous was about to unfold. Millie was quiet in the back seat of the SUV, her small form wrapped in a blanket one of the shelter staff had handed her. Her head rested against the window, but her eyes stayed open, watching the buildings drift by. Beside her, Keanu sat silently, scanning the road ahead and behind, his mind racing with possibilities. The SUV moved through the city streets, headlights gliding over crosswalks and dim storefronts. The driver, an ex-Marine named Dean, someone Keanu trusted completely, drove with calm precision. Keanu had only needed to say 3 words: "We're being watched." That was all Dean needed. No questions. Just focus. As they turned a corner, Keanu's eyes caught something in the side mirror. A dark sedan. Not unusual. But this one had been behind them for 5 turns now, always keeping just enough distance to avoid suspicion, but close enough that Keanu could feel it like a splinter in the back of his mind. He leaned forward, tapped Dean on the shoulder and spoke in a low voice. "Take us through 4th and Elm, the back alleys." Dean gave a slight nod and adjusted their course. Millie finally spoke, her voice soft but sharp like she was afraid to break the silence. "Is someone following us?" Keanu didn't lie. "Maybe, but we're going to be okay. I promise." Millie looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the passing lights. "People used to follow us sometimes. When we lived in the old place. Mom would always tell me to hold her hand and keep walking no matter what." He reached out and took her small hand gently. "That's good advice." The SUV cut through narrower streets now, the buildings closing in on both sides, graffiti covered, walls and old fire escapes looming above them like steel vines. Dean took a sharp left, then another, making loops that would lose any amateur tail. But the dark sedan stayed close. Not aggressive, not reckless, just steady, persistent. Keanu's heart pounded. He had dealt with obsessive fans before. People who crossed boundaries, but this felt different. This felt like someone who wasn't just watching, but waiting. They pulled into a dim parking garage beneath an abandoned office building. Dean killed the headlights and eased the SUV into a shadowed corner. Keanu turned around to Millie, who looked both scared and calm, too calm for a child her age. "We're going to sit here for a minute," he said. She nodded. Keanu stepped out of the car and signaled for Dean to stay inside with her. He moved quickly behind a concrete pillar and waited. Less than a minute later, the black sedan rolled into the garage and stopped in the middle. Its lights remained on, casting eerie beams across the empty space. The driver didn't get out. He just sat there. Keanu's breath was slow, controlled. He didn't approach immediately. Instead, he circled wide, using shadows like a veteran actor on a noir set. When he finally approached the driver's side window, He knocked once. The window slid down. A man in a black coat and gloves looked up, older, clean-shaven, with sharp features and cold eyes. "You're following a child," Keanu said, his voice calm but tight with steel. "Explain yourself." The man smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. "I was hoping we could talk." "About what?" "Amelia Grace Wexley." Keanu didn't blink. "You have 5 seconds before I call the police." The man reached into his coat slowly, pulled out a business card, and handed it over. "No need for theatrics, Mr. Reeves. I represent a legal firm that handles family estate matters. We've been searching for Ms. Wexley's heir for years. Imagine our surprise when she shows up on your arm." Keanu read the card. Plain, expensive paper, embossed in silver. No name, just a firm. "You work for the Wexleys?" The man's lips thinned. "I work near them. They prefer distance." "She's just a child," Keanu said. "You people let her mother die. You think you can just take her? We intend to offer her protection, security, a life she was born into." "She already had a life," Keanu snapped. "Her mother gave everything to keep her safe from people like you." The man leaned slightly forward, eyes like ice. "Do you know what's at stake? Do you have any idea what that child carries? In her bloodline? If you interfere, you could put her in even greater danger." Keanu stepped back, disgusted. "And what's the danger? That she'll remember the truth? That she'll speak it?" The man's eyes didn't flinch. "It's not just the past she threatens, it's the future." Before Keanu could respond, the man added, "You think this is about inheritance? It's about survival. People are already watching, not just us, others, people you can't imagine." Then, without another word, the window rolled up and the sedan backed out, tires humming against the concrete like whispers in a tomb. Keanu stood still for a moment, the card still in his hand. His mind raced. Everything was unraveling too fast. What started as a chance encounter was now connected to secrets buried under money, power, and fear. He returned to the SUV. Millie looked at him with wide eyes. "Was it him?" "Someone," he said. "What did he say?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He looked down at the card, then at Millie. "He said you're important, more than you know." Millie sat up straighter. "Does that mean I'm in danger?" He reached out and took her hand again. "It means we're going to be smart. And we're going to be brave." "Like my mom?" "Exactly like your mom." Dean started the engine again and they pulled out into the night. But this time, Keanu gave new instructions. They weren't going to any hotel, not a place that could be traced. They were going somewhere no one could find them. Not yet. A safe house in the mountains, a friend of Keanu's, a retired intelligence officer who owed him a favor, had built it for moments like this. Not for a child, not for a real girl named Amelia, but Keanu had already made a choice, and there was no turning back. The next morning, news broke across entertainment networks. Keanu Reeves disappears after emotional encounter with young fan. Who is the mysterious child seen with Keanu Reeves? Security concerns rise. As internet sleuths uncover the name Amelia Grace Wexley, Keanu turned off the screen. He had kept her safe for one night, but the world was closing in. Just before dawn, Millie wanders outside the cabin and vanishes into the woods. When Keanu finds what she was chasing, it changes everything he thought he knew about her mother's past. What she saw in the tree's dawn came slowly to the edge of the mountain forest, brushing pale light across the tops of the fir trees and gently nudging the frost-covered world awake. The safe house was nestled deep among the evergreens far from the nearest road, hidden by terrain and time. Keanu Reeves had barely slept. He had sat near the stone fireplace most of the night, staring into the flickering embers, his thoughts turning over like the wheels of a train with no brakes. The cabin was silent except for the occasional creak of the wooden beams and the soft rhythm of Millie's breathing in the guest bedroom. At least he had believed she was sleeping. But when the wind outside shifted, carrying a sudden gust against the window pane and rattling the lock, Something stirred in Keanu's chest, a flicker of worry. He stood, quietly walked to the hallway, and opened the door to Millie's room. The bed was empty. His stomach dropped. The blanket had been folded back gently, the way children do when they're trying not to wake anyone. Her red backpack was gone. The door to the back porch was slightly ajar, letting in a thin line of cold air. Keanu stepped outside without hesitation, barefoot, wearing only a long-sleeve shirt and jeans. The forest was wrapped in a silver mist, the kind that made everything look like a dream just slipping out of reach. He scanned the tree line, heart racing. Then he saw the footprints, small ones pressing lightly into the frozen earth. They disappeared into the woods. Without another thought, he followed. The trees closed around him, tall and quiet, like sentinels watching a drama unfold. He moved fast, calling her name softly but urgently. Millie. Millie. Where are you? His voice bounced between the trunks but brought no answer. He pressed deeper, stepping over roots, ducking under low branches, moving through brambles that scratched his arms. Then he saw it. Just ahead, through the trees. A figure, small, still. Millie was sitting at the base of an old pine tree, knees pulled to her chest, backpack clutched in her lap. She wasn't crying, but her face was pale, her eyes locked on something in front of her. Keanu hurried toward her. Millie, what are you doing out here? I was worried. She raised a hand slowly, stopping him mid-sentence. Look, she whispered, pointing. Keanu followed her gaze. Not far from where she sat, half buried beneath moss and a tangle of roots, was a rusted metal box. It looked ancient, almost like an old army footlocker, its edges eaten by time and damp earth. It had been hidden perhaps for years, but now it was exposed as if the forest itself had decided it was time. I heard something last night, Millie said quietly. A voice. I thought it was a dream. But it sounded like her, like my mom. She was singing, like she used to when I couldn't sleep. Keanu crouched beside her, his eyes still on the box. And you followed it? She nodded. I didn't mean to scare you, but I had to know. Carefully, Keanu approached the box. It was heavy, the lid stubborn, but after a moment, with effort, he pried it open. Inside were papers, photographs, old tapes, and at the very bottom, a small velvet bag containing a golden locket. Keanu picked it up and opened it. Inside was a picture of a much younger Emma, smiling, holding a baby with impossibly bright eyes. Millie looked over his shoulder. That's me, she whispered. Keanu gently handed her the locket, then turned back to the papers. He sifted through them carefully. There were letters, court records, personal notes, all written in Emma's familiar, shaky handwriting. Some were addressed to someone named Rose, others were labeled with dates that stretched back more than a decade, and then there was a folder marked with a single word: leverage. Inside the folder were photos, grainy black and white images of men in suits, meetings behind closed doors, documents being signed. But the final picture made Keanu stop breathing. It showed a much younger Emma standing beside a man in a gray coat, his face half hidden in shadow. But Keanu recognized him instantly. He had seen that face in tabloids, political magazines, headlines. Senator Charles Wexley. Her father. Millie's grandfather. Beneath the photo was a small note in Emma's handwriting. If anything happens to me, it's because I didn't give this to them. Don't let them find her. Don't let them twist her into another one of them. Keanu sat back, the weight of what he had just read sinking into him like stone. Emma hadn't just run away. She had escaped something monstrous. And now with her gone, the people who wanted to bury the truth were coming for the only remaining thread that could unravel their power. Millie. What does it mean? Millie asked, looking up at him. Keanu didn't want to frighten her, but he knew she deserved the truth. It means your mom was brave, he said, and it means she knew things that some very powerful people didn't want the world to know. Are they coming for me? Not if I can help it. Millie held the locket tightly. I want to finish what she started. Keanu looked at her, stunned by her courage. You're just a child. But I'm her daughter. He couldn't argue with that. They packed the contents of the box into the red backpack. Keanu carried it this time. When they returned to the cabin, the fire had long gone out. The world outside was waking up, and somewhere in that world, Keanu knew people were watching, waiting. But now they had something to fight with. Not just secrets, not just names. Proof. Keanu made a call. Not to the police, not to the press. He called an old friend from his past, someone who had once been buried in the intelligence world, now living off-grid under a different name. The man answered with a single word. Go. That was all Keanu needed. He didn't know how this would end, but he knew one thing for certain. Millie wasn't just a girl with a tragic story. She was a spark, and sparks could burn down empires. As Keanu prepares to reveal the evidence, a stranger breaks into the cabin, someone from Emma's past with a story that could change everything or destroy what little hope remains. The stranger at the door. The fireplace crackled back to life as Keanu sat near the hearth, slowly flipping through the remaining contents of the rusted box they had found in the woods. Millie sat across from him at the long wooden table, quietly, eating a bowl of warm oatmeal, her legs swinging beneath the chair. The air in the cabin felt thick with revelation. Each document they uncovered peeled back another layer of Emma's past, exposing a history more tangled than they had ever expected. Between newspaper clippings, letters with smudged ink, and half-burnt photographs, one thing had become clear. Emma hadn't merely been a runaway daughter. She had been a whistleblower in hiding, and Millie, unknowingly, carried the key to everything. Keanu's phone buzzed beside him, vibrating across the table. It was a secure number, one of only 3 people he trusted enough to contact him directly during a blackout like this. He answered quickly. "We scanned the documents," said the voice on the other end. It belonged to Silas, the man Keanu had once saved during a covert humanitarian operation years ago, someone who now owed him his life. "What you've got isn't just political, it's generational. It goes back to a company called Viterra Holdings. It's owned by a trust. That trust is in the Wexley family's name." Keanu's brows drew together. "What kind of company?" "Human trials, undocumented research, offshore facilities, stuff buried so deep you'd need a government subpoena and a miracle to dig it out. But your file has codes, dates, and a testimony from a nurse who vanished 12 years ago. This is enough to blow a hole in the Wexley's entire foundation." Keanu felt the weight of those words. This wasn't about guardianship or inheritance anymore. It was about justice. And possibly revenge. He hung up and looked at Millie, who had stopped eating and was now watching him silently. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" she asked. He nodded. "Something's always been wrong. But now we know how to fix it." She took a deep breath, looked down at her locket again, and whispered, "Then let's do it. For her." Keanu stood and began organizing the documents into a protective case, preparing them for transfer. They couldn't keep everything at the cabin. If someone came, it would all be lost. Silas had already arranged a courier to retrieve the files. It was a delicate process. Timing had to be perfect, or the people watching would make their move. But just as Keanu was about to seal the case, something happened that neither of them had expected. A knock at the door. A single knock. Then silence. Keanu froze. Millie looked at him with wide eyes. They hadn't told anyone else where they were. No one should have been able to find them. Keanu stepped quietly to the wall and retrieved the old hunting rifle Silas had left in the cabin's back room. It was loaded. He moved carefully to the door and looked through the peephole. A woman stood on the porch, half-shadowed by the roof's overhang, her hair pulled back, coat soaked from snow. She looked exhausted, shaken, and familiar. Keanu opened the door slowly, keeping the rifle lowered but ready. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady but cautious. The woman stepped forward and raised her hands. "My name is Rose," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm Emma's sister." Keanu felt the air leave his lungs. Behind him, Millie stood up slowly, her eyes locked on the stranger. "My mom had a sister?" Rose nodded, tears beginning to slide down her face. She told me to disappear, and I did. I've been running ever since. But when I saw your face on TV, with Millie, I knew it was time to come back. Keanu stepped aside and let her in, but didn't put the rifle away. Rose sat at the table, hands trembling. Emma didn't just run from the Wexleys, she ran from their plan. Our family was born into something dark, something designed to protect money, not people. I helped her escape. I was a nurse at one of the facilities. I smuggled out names, photos. She collected the rest. But when she got pregnant with Millie, everything changed. She wanted to vanish, to protect her. Keanu handed her a copy of one of the photos from the box. Do you recognize this? Rose took one look and nodded. That's the core team. All of them are either dead or missing now, except one. The man in the gray coat. Her father, Keanu said. Rose shook her head. Not just her father. The architect. The one who designed everything. And now that Millie's alive, he'll want to control her. Or erase her. Millie stepped forward, voice small but firm. Then why didn't he come already? Rose looked at her, eyes full of sorrow. Because he wants to make sure no one's watching. He doesn't move until the cameras are off. But when he does, it's fast, silent, and final. Keanu clenched his jaw. Then we make noise. Rose nodded slowly. You'll need to bring this public, all of it, every file, every name. But once you do, there's no going back. You'll be marked. So will she. Keanu looked at Millie, and for the first time since meeting her, he saw not just a child, but someone who had already survived more than most adults, someone who had been broken and rebuilt in silence, whose strength came not from her name but from her spirit. Then we don't go back, he said. Just then, outside the window, they saw it. A drone, black and quiet, hovering near the treetops. We've been found, Rose whispered. Keanu grabbed the case and handed it to Millie. Take this to the storm hatch. It's under the floorboard in the bedroom. Hide it. Lock it. Millie nodded and ran. Keanu turned to Rose. Can you fight? She pulled a pistol from her coat. I never stopped. In seconds, everything shifted. Shadows moved outside. A vehicle's engine cut in the distance. Keanu and Rose took position as the cabin filled with the silence before a storm. They weren't just protecting documents anymore. They were protecting the last living truth, and the truth had teeth. Masked intruders break into the cabin. But what they find waiting inside is not fear. It's a reckoning. And as Millie uncovers one last letter from her mother, it may hold the power to bring the entire legacy to its knees. The final letters, fell harder now, soft and slow but relentless, blanketing the forest with a deceptive calm. Inside the wooden cabin, the fire had gone out again, leaving the rooms bathed in shadows and silence. Every creak of the floor, every whistle of the wind against the glass, carried weight. Keanu Reeves moved like a shadow himself, crouched low near the back door, eyes sharp, breath measured. Rose stood at the front, back to the wall, her pistol raised and steady, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. And in the narrow bedroom, beneath the floorboards of a room once filled with warmth, Millie waited, holding the locked steel, case closed, her small fingers trembling not with fear, but with the weight of purpose. They had expected danger. What they hadn't expected was how quickly it would come. The first sound was faint, the snap of a twig outside, far too deliberate to be wildlife. Then the second, closer. Boots against frozen earth. 3 figures emerged from the dark woods, dressed in black from head to toe, faces hidden behind tactical masks. No markings, no hesitation. They moved like ghosts, trained, professional, dangerous. Keanu watched them through the edge of the frosted window. He didn't panic. He had prepared for this, played out scenarios in his head again and again. He turned to Rose and gave her a slight nod. They didn't need words. The first masked man approached the cabin's door, inserted a small device into the lock, a silencer for breaking and entering. It clicked green. The door opened, but the cabin was already a trap. As the man stepped in, Keanu came from the side, not with a punch or a weapon, but with a full-bodied tackle that slammed the intruder into the wall hard enough to shake the shelves. The gun clattered across the floor. Rose fired once, clean and direct, taking down the second man as he stepped through the front entrance. The third tried to run, but Keanu was already behind him, disarming him with a swift move and slamming him to the ground with the kind of force that came not from rage, but from complete clarity. "Who sent you?" Keanu hissed, pinning the man to the floor, knee to his back. The man said nothing. Instead, he bit down on something in his cheek. Within seconds, foam began to leak from the corners of his mouth. He spasmed and went still. "Cyanide," Rose muttered. They were prepared to die. Keanu stood slowly, staring at the lifeless man beneath him. This wasn't a scare tactic. This was a cleanup job. Rose knelt beside the other man, now wounded and unconscious. She checked his pockets, pulled a flash drive from a hidden pouch sewn into his jacket. "What's on it?" Keanu asked. "I don't know," Rose replied, "but we'll find out." Just then, from the back room, Millie stepped into the hallway, still holding the metal case, her eyes wide but calm. "Is it over?" she asked. Keanu walked to her, crouched down, and gently took the case from her hands. "For now. You did good." She nodded. "I found something else." From the folds of her backpack, she pulled out an old envelope. It had been taped beneath the bottom of the case, hidden from view. On it, in her mother's handwriting, were the words, "For Millie, when it's time to tell the truth." Rose took the envelope and looked at Keanu, who nodded slowly. Millie sat down beside the fire pit, and Keanu sat beside her as Rose read the letter aloud. "My dearest Millie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And if Keanu is with you, then you are in good hands. I always hoped he would be the one to find you. He reminded me once, years ago, when I was a nobody, what kindness looked like when the world gave none. He didn't know it then, but he saved me long before I ever ran. You are more than my daughter. You are the light that reminded me who I was. They tried to take everything from me, but they could never take you. You are not just a Wexley. You are the end of their legacy and the beginning of something honest. You don't owe them your name. You owe the world your truth. When you're ready, share what we've hidden, not for revenge, not for power, but because no child, no family, should ever have to live in silence again. I love you more than life ever allowed me to say. Now go and be brave in the light always, Mom." The room was silent. Tears rolled down Millie's cheeks, but she didn't cry loudly. It was the kind of sorrow that sat deep and quiet inside the chest. The kind that didn't break you, but remade. "You?" Keanu stood and walked to the old landline connected to a hidden uplink in the cabin. He called Silas again. "We're ready," he said. The next 3 days moved like wildfire. Keanu, Rose, and Silas uploaded the documents to a secure server, delivering them anonymously to trusted journalists, human rights organizations, and international law groups. The flash drive from the assassin's jacket revealed a list of cover-ups going back 25 years. Contracts, payments, names. When the press release dropped, it went viral within minutes. Wexley Empire tied to illegal human testing and offshore experimentation. Whistleblower's daughter reappears, exposes darkest family secrets. Keanu Reeves shelters orphan girl, leads global truth campaign. But the most unexpected moment came during the live press conference held by the legal team. They didn't show Millie's face. They didn't use her real name. Instead, they played a voice recording, Millie herself reading her mother's final letter aloud. The world listened, and the world wept. In the weeks that followed, arrests were made. The Wexley fortune collapsed. Hidden facilities were exposed. Families who had long grieved in silence stepped forward. Truth, once buried beneath layers of power and lies, rose like a storm no one could contain. And through it all, Millie never left Keanu's side. They traveled quietly, not as fugitives, not as heroes, just as two souls, one learning what it meant to live and the other remembering why he had chosen to walk this strange, painful, beautiful world with quiet dignity. One evening, months later, they sat under the stars outside a quiet farmhouse in Tuscany, where no one asked questions and no one chased them with cameras. Millie looked up at Keanu. "Do you think she knows?" He smiled. "I think she knew before we even began." She leaned against him. "You never had to do all this." He put his arm around her shoulder gently. "But I wanted to, and I still do." She looked at the stars for a long moment, then whispered, "You saved me." Keanu shook his head slowly. "You saved all of us." And in that silence, in that small, precious moment beneath the sky, there was no legacy left to fear. There was only hope, the kind that starts with one child and changes the world.